Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this media availability today. My name is Lori Arguelles, and I am the Director of Communications here at NOAA, and we are delighted to host this briefing and to have a number of key folks helping us to demonstrate this whole of government approach to our new website tool. We'll be hearing from a number of people today, including Ali Zaidi, who you see on the screen, and Secretary Raimondo, representing the Commerce Department. You'll hear from NOAA officials and HHS officials as well in just a moment. And I would like to remind you that you do have the ability to manipulate your screen if you would like to see faces a little bit more prominent than the slide. You're welcome to do that. I'll be giving you some more specific instructions on how to ask questions after we get through our remarks. And let me just begin by turning it over to Deputy White House National Climate Advisor, Ali Zaidi. Ali, thank you.
Thanks, Lori, and thanks everybody for joining us. Over the past week, you know, it's been really hard to escape the reality of an urgent climate crisis all across our country. And one way that the American people have been facing this down is in the form of extreme heat that is gripping over 70 million Americans, families coping with record-breaking temperatures into the 3 digits, really scorching across the country. And you know, as we take this in, we know that that's not just an environmental phenomenon; it's a public health threat. As the #1 weather-related cause of death in the United States, extreme heat has sent on average over 67,000 people to emergency rooms per year, just because of heat-related illnesses. We know each year 9,000 people are hospitalized because of extreme heat. And we know that heat, like so many of these impacts of climate change, is interactive with some of these other effects. So it is intensifying the drought, the 41 states that are experiencing moderate or severe drought across the country. It's making it harder, the task of farmers and ranchers around the country, the 225 million acres of crops that are experiencing drought conditions in the United States. And it's making the job harder for folks, for example, the firefighters in Mariposa County in California, who are having to deal with wildfire, which has already burned 5 million acres across the country in more extreme conditions. And so that's why the president, really from day one, and increasingly faster and faster, increasingly with greater ambition, has made climate and tackling climate change such a central element of his administration. Last year, under the president's National Climate Task Force, we formed a working group on extreme heat. And our colleagues at NOAA and the Department of Commerce have really been critical partners and leaders in that effort. The launch of Heat.gov is, in a way, I think the culmination of one of the key streams of work within that interagency group, and that is getting in the hands of local officials and the American people decision-ready data that is real-time, that meets people where they are and gives them the information that they need to adapt in real time. But maybe what I wanted to underscore, because you'll hear a lot more about Heat.gov and the incredible service that the NOAA team is delivering here, I wanted to just take a step back and talk a little bit about the president's broader efforts to help communities deal with extreme heat and the intensifying heat waves. Last week, the president announced the largest investment in history through the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, the BRIC program, through FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security, $2.3 billion. Now, just how that works, communities are able to get that money in grant form to help build things like cooling centers. So you've got vulnerable Americans who aren't able to stay cool at home. They will be able to go to a community center, and a brick program would help them fund something like that. It also helps really these communities build their infrastructure in terms of human capital. So I met actually earlier this year with the city of Miami. They now have a chief resilience officer who's focused on extreme heat day in and day out, helping coordinate response to those challenges. So the $2.3 billion that the president announced last week will help fund those sorts of efforts. The second thing that the president did yesterday, for the longest time, the federal government has had a program called NIHHIS, used primarily by folks in the Northeast. I'm sure as Governor Gina Raimondo was familiar with the NIHHIS program, and it's something that people used to keep warm during the winter months. The president has secured the largest investment ever in NIHHIS, $8 billion across several bipartisan legislative efforts. And what he did last week was announce a new set of rules that allows NIHHIS to be used to help vulnerable Americans actually deal with the cooling challenge of the summertime. So deal with their cooling bills, but also allow states and local governments to buy and loan energy efficient air conditioners. So that's money that the states have right now that the president has unleashed to help get after the cooling challenge for the summertime. So that's the BRIC funding for community level resilience, the NIHHIS funding for individuals getting support right now on cooling. And then on the worker front, for the first time ever, the president has directed the Department of Labor to develop heat standards to make sure that we're protecting our workers. There's 70 at-risk industries. You think about, for example, folks in the building trades doing those construction jobs. We need to make sure that those employers are protecting those workers. And in addition to building a new heat standard that can apply to these industries, the Department of Labor is actually out there doing inspections on a regular basis now under the president's direction to make sure that workers are being protected. Over 500 inspections since the beginning of this administration. And the last thing I'll point out, and this is, I think, really such a hallmark of the way that the Biden-Harris administration goes after the challenge of climate change, is to see clearly and recognize that it is something that disproportionately impacts communities of color, low-income communities, communities often left out and left behind. You know, you look at the data. Communities that were redlined historically in housing policy are literally hotter today because there's more pavement and fewer trees. And that's why the president secured funding in the bipartisan infrastructure law to actually help get money to communities to improve this specific, make improvements on the specific issue, fighting against what we call the urban heat island effect by helping get pavement out and trees in and improving the heat resilience of communities around the country. And we're grateful to be doing that through efforts by the Department of Agriculture and HUD. So just to give you that sense of breadth, whether it's funding for communities, support directly to consumers, standards for the workplace and inspections to make sure employers are living up to their promise, attacking urban heat island effect and the disparities that we see across the country in terms of the impacts of heat. And then, of course, making sure we're getting data and information in a reliable form. And for that and with that, let me hand it over to just one of the most incredible champions for climate action, and really climate action done the right way, in a way that boosts our economy and addresses and advances the challenges of equity. Secretary Raimondo, over to you.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you. It's great to see you, and thanks for joining us today. I think you did a beautiful job and said it all. I'll just offer a few comments because we here at the Commerce Department are really very serious about fighting climate with every tool in our toolbox. But we're lucky that NOAA reports into the Commerce Department and has some of the best climate scientists and activists in the world. And as you just said, Allie, you don't have to look far. You don't have to look far at all to see that extreme weather is having a massive negative effect on our communities. Extreme weather events are more frequent and more expensive and more lethal than they ever have been. It's getting worse and worse and worse. More people die every year from heat and heat-related illnesses than any other type of weather event. And by the way, that's on full display right now in our country and in Europe. So obviously it's why we're working so hard to prepare Americans and to prevent these tragedies. We don't have to accept this, right? This doesn't have to be this way. And so that's why, we're working as hard as we are here at NOAA and at the Commerce Department. And I should say, I'm just so proud of NOAA. I'm proud. I was with the whole team last week, and they're doing incredible work, and they have a lead role in this effort, right alongside of the White House, right alongside of the CDC and Secretary Becerra's team. And through the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, we in HHS are going to work across the government with the EPA, with FEMA, with the VA, with the National Park Service to share our best tools and information with decision makers at all levels. And that's important, at all levels. So, you could be a mom trying to decide this summer, is it safe for your kids to play outside, to go to camp? You could be a park manager or public works manager determining when road repairs can and should be undertaken. Or as Allie said, a farmer figuring out when it's okay to be out in the fields. The information on Heat.gov is designed to help you. Concrete, actionable information at Heat.gov to help you navigate the risks associated with extreme weather events. And as I said before, the trend is disturbing, right? Extreme heat is deadly. It's also incredibly expensive. Here at the Commerce Department, we think a lot about the economy. We estimate that we lose $100 billion every year as a result of outdoor workers not being able to do their jobs because of extreme heat conditions. And by the way, that's to say nothing of the wildfires and other damage done to our economy and the cost to our economy of these events. So the reality is, given the scientific predictions, this summer, with its oppressive and widespread heat waves, is likely to be one of the coolest summers of the rest of our lives. That's a pretty scary thing to think that this is the coolest, because it doesn't feel very cool. And it's why the president is so committed to taking meaningful action to mitigate climate change. And it's why I and the whole team at the Commerce Department has addressing climate change as a top priority, and building a climate-ready nation is our top priority. We need to build a climate-ready nation that's prosperous in the face of these changes. And Heat.gov is just, one example. It's an essential part of meeting that goal. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here and just thank each and every one of you for your passion and commitment to this work.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. We greatly appreciate your time and your interest in this issue. We know you have to head off to other obligations, so we'll say thank you. And let me now turn it to Dr. Patrick Bricey, who is the Director of the Center for Disease Control's National Center for Environmental Health and the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. Dr. Bricey, thank you for giving us a little bit of perspective from the health side of the equation.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here with you today for the launch of Heat.gov. This is an important and timely tool that brings together data and resources on heat from across the federal government, making this information more accessible for the general public, decision makers, and public health professionals. CDC is glad to be co-lead of the National Integrated Heat and Health Information System, I'll refer to that as NIHHIS, and a key partner in the launch of Heat.gov. As the CDC director, Dr. Walensky said in her opening remarks at the recent inaugural NIHHIS meeting, the partnership between the National Center for Environmental Health and NOAA harnesses our very powerful data sets to better predict health outcomes and provide local heat response plans with a threshold for activation that protects our communities. As you've heard, extreme heat is a significant source of health burden in the United States. Extreme heat events result in many hundreds of deaths and tens of thousands of ED visits each year. And extreme heat is only going to get worse due to a changing climate. Since 2009, CDC's Climate and Health Program has provided resources to enhance capacity of health departments to plan for and address climate through its flagship program, the Climate Ready States and Cities Initiative. The Climate and Health Program focuses on climate health adaptation, and heat has been identified as a concern for all our grant recipients across the country. The Climate Ready States and Cities Initiative helps grant recipients to identify climate impacts in their communities and potential health effects associated with these impacts. The initiative also has tools that allow health departments to focus their efforts on the most at-risk populations and locations. Just one example, if I take a minute. The work accomplished by the state health departments in Rhode Island, Maine, and New Hampshire, Vermont, where they partnered with the National Weather Service to form a Northeast Regional Heat Collaborative. This multi-agency partnership pooled data to increase our understanding of the relationship between heat and hospitalizations and deaths. This helped change the National Weather Service heat advisory policies across New England to be more sensitive to when heat effects are to be expected. For the past decade, the CDC Climate Health Program has worked to develop resources for communities to plan and to adapt to changing climate. Working with our grantees, we have developed adaptation strategies that have been shown to reduce the impacts of extreme heat. These resources include guidance documents on extreme heat events, the use of cooling centers, how to develop heat response plans. We also provide communication and training materials on extreme heat with specific series for youth sports coaches and social media toolkits on extreme heat for state and local health departments. These resources are all available through Heat.gov webpage. The CDC Climate and Health Program and the Environmental Public Health Tracking Program work together with NOAA to develop CDC's Heat and Health Tracker. This is a free open access tool that provides real-time local level heat and health information to help communities better prepare for and respond to heat events. This is an example of having decision-ready data that you heard earlier. The tracker is an example of the power of cross-agency collaboration. This was a collaboration between CDC and NOAA, and more information on the tracker is available on Heat.gov. Heat.gov is an important resource for responding to public health effects of extreme heat. CDC is glad to have been able to collaborate on this initiative and to make heat and health information more available and accessible to inform decision makers and health responders to reduce the impacts of extreme heat on health. Thank you for allowing me to be here with you this morning. I'd like to now turn it over to Rick, to Dr. Spinrad, the NOAA administrator.
Thank you, Dr. Bricey. Let me just put today's rollout of Heat.gov into context. And I'm delighted that we were able to hear from the health perspective, from the department perspective, from the White House perspective. My job is to be the weather and climate guy, and I want to give you a number of bits of information, data points, if you will, to really put an emphasis on why this is such a critical activity and why it's so important we roll it out now. So obviously, more than 100 million people across the nation, a third of our nation, have been under a heat advisory or warning just over the last couple of weeks. Dozens of cities have broken daily temperature records, and several have tied or broken monthly or all-time records. For example, Abilene, Texas reached 110 degrees 3 days in a row from July 18th through 20th, breaking the daily record for each of those days, including one which went back to 1936. Salt Lake City tied an all-time record of 107 degrees and has reached that temperature 4 times now, 3 of those times falling in the last 20 years. Meanwhile, while we may be cooling down temporarily here on the East Coast, extreme heat is continuing across other parts of the U.S. Later this week, daily records in places like Spokane, Washington, and Boise, Idaho could break as temperatures are expected to soar into the low to mid 100s. Heat wasn't only prominent across North America. Many of you know that just last week, our friends across the pond in the UK reached 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit for the first time in recorded history. July 2021 was the hottest month ever recorded on Earth, and summers are getting hotter and deadlier. The annual average temperature of the contiguous US has already warmed over the past few decades and is projected to rise by 5 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of this century. The good news is that heat-related illnesses and death are largely preventable with proper planning, monitoring, and education, as we've heard. City officials, the growing number of heat resilience officers, as well as doctors, nurses, first responders, I'd even add researchers and the general public, are increasingly requesting federal support to underscore the complex and dangerous nature of extreme heat. Heat.gov helps to meet this growing need for authoritative heat and health tools and information. It will help us become, as you heard from Secretary Raimondo, a climate-ready nation. We also know that extreme heat is not experienced the same among populations. It disproportionately affects older adults, pregnant women, and children, people experiencing homelessness, outdoor and indoor workers, and many, many more. To serve the American people, Heat.gov offers up a variety of products such as maps, data, information from across disciplines. You'll hear more about that in a moment. From inside and outside of government that will enable informed decisions by communities on a daily basis and allow planning weeks and months ahead. The site features heat information from across federal agencies. It truly is an all-of-government approach, including heat forecasts from our own weather service at NOAA and information about our urban heat island campaign, which focuses on those vulnerable populations I just alluded to. Heat.gov was created in collaboration with our great partners at Esri, which is a geographic information system company. The website is hosted on Esri's cloud-based geospatial platform, which allows easy access to a range of features, such as localized heat information and links to heat tools across the federal government. Let me turn now to Hunter Jones, the program manager for Heat.gov, to take us through some of the highlights of this incredible web-based tool. Hunter?
Thank you, Dr. Spinrad. I'm Hunter Jones, the National Integrated Heat Health Information System Program Manager. And in just one moment, I'll be sharing my screen here. Excellent. Okay. So that should be coming up for everybody. While it does, I just want to get oriented, showing you the main page here of Heat.gov. First of all, you can see at the top that we have a navigation bar, and I'll be walking through a number of these features, as well as in the main pane here where you can see some additional information. Welcome to Heat.gov. It's the premier source of heat and health information for the nation to reduce the health, economic, and infrastructural impacts of extreme heat. As we've heard, it is a major interagency effort. This page is meant to be a starting point for the public and for decision makers to find information from the government on extreme heat. And you can easily launch into other agencies' pages and their detailed resources from here. Just to get a little bit more oriented, on the left side, I want to point out that there is a translate feature. So in addition to having it in English here, you can pop this open and translate into a number of different languages. That's functionality available through the Esri hub. I also want to point out that there is the opportunity to share this page, and any page that you're on has a unique link, so you can share this in Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. On the right side here, you can see a news box. These are the top 3 news items that we're featuring now, but there are other places where news bubbles up on the site, and we can show you those later. And then we also have some feature boxes below the news in the Welcome to Heat.gov box that we can change seasonally or as we need to make sure that the most important information is bubbling up to the top and at the fingertips of people who need to use it. At this point, I'll now scroll down a little bit further and show you some of the interactive content for Heat.gov. First of all, this tool we anticipate will be very popular. It is showing the current alerts from the Weather Service, so watches, warnings, and advisories in terms of how they cover the population of the United States. And so you can see, for example, if you mouse over these bars, on the 20th of July, it was a very serious day for heat when 46% of the population was under one of those active products. And of course, today, where you can see that that number is 38 million or so. That information in this box corresponds to the interactive map below. You can see right now where those active warnings, watches, and advisories are. If you scroll in a little bit further, you can actually pull in the maximum temperature map for today. If I take this legend and I just hide it for now, I can also show you that, and anytime you see this stack of cards here, basically it's a layer list. This is available in a lot of our tools that are on this site. You can open that up and you can actually get additional layers that you can make visible or invisible as you want to conduct your analysis. I do want to show you that if you click on one of these, you get additional information on that warning, watch, or advisory. And if you scroll down even further, you can click the more info link. And this is just one example of where we link off to agency pages. So you can go to the Weather Service to find more information on that warning. I'll now show you just a few more tabs in this interactive map. You can also see the current temperature. So before it was the maximum temperature for the day. This is the current temperatures that are station-based across the country, and you can click on any one of these stations and get more information in Fahrenheit and Celsius. We also have climate outlooks on another tab coming from the Climate Prediction Center from NOAA. And so this right now is showing you the day 6 to 10 outlook, but we have 8 to 14 monthly and seasonal. And if you click on any one of these polygons, you can get information on that. So you can see that the Climate Prediction Center predicts this area has a 90% chance of being above normal temperatures in this date range. We also have extreme heat days in 2050, and we show this in two ways. One is showing extreme heat days that are in the top 1%. I can click this eye anywhere. I haven't shown you this yet. I can click this eye to get a description. So you can see a little bit of information on what we're looking at. And then if I scroll in and click on one of these polygons, you can get that information on the number of days expected to be in the top 1% historically in 2050. And the last tab here is similar information, only it's set at a threshold of 90 Fahrenheit. So as we walk through these different layers, you can see that we're sort of building out the timeline, building out the predictions and projections going out to various timescales. Below this, I just want to show you that we have featured tools right now. The two that are featured are the Heat and Health Tracker from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as well as the Climate Explorer, which is available from climate.gov. Down a little bit further, we have Heat News, and this is also available on our news and events page that I'll show you in a moment. These are just the top heat items that are bubbling up. One that I would like to focus on, that I'd like to call out, is that we do have a webinar coming up, a webinar series, the first of which will be on August 24th, and it's looking at overlooked and overburdened populations that are at increased risk from extreme heat. And so the first population that we'll cover is the LGBTQIA+ community, including sexual orientation, sexual identity, and gender expression. At the bottom of this main page, I want to show you that this gray bar will be on every page, and it indicates the agencies that are part of the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, or part of making this site, as well as contact information on the right, where you can send feedback, contact the webmaster, and join the mailing list called the Heat Beat. So at this point, I will go back up to the top and walk through a few more features. I won't spend a lot of time on news and events, but as you might guess, this is where we have all of our news and events cards, and you can click into any one of these and get more information on that item. I did mention the webinars, so I'll show you that we have the Overlooked and Overburdened webinar series here, and there's more information available at this page. And the NIHHIS national meeting, which was referenced earlier, is archived here as well, so you can go into this page and get additional information, watch the recordings, and see the agenda. The next page over is the Learn tab. I'll just show you quickly that this tab has information on what extreme heat is and just some basic background information for people. We anticipate that this tab will be updated more and more over time. We also have a set of terminology here to help people familiarize themselves with extreme heat terms. On the Urban Heat Islands tab, I would like to spend a little bit more time on this one. First of all, we have a very brief primer on what urban heat islands are. And if you click on the mapping campaigns link, which is just below the Urban Heat Islands tab here, it opens up a really feature-rich set of information from our NIHHIS Urban Heat Island mapping campaigns. First of all, you can see the map where we've conducted campaigns, and also in the lavender color where we are conducting campaigns right now. Some of them went this past weekend, so this is a very active process, and I know that a lot of people are interested in these mapping campaigns. So you can see the full spread here, and then there's additional information on the background of the campaigns. This tab for the 2022 campaign application right now is for information, but the 2023 application will likely open up in the October timeframe. So when that does, this tab will be updated with application information. I do want to go into the campaign cities really quickly and show you that. There's an interactive map of all of the locations where we're conducting, where we have conducted or are conducting these mapping campaigns. If you scroll into any one of these campaigns, let's look at Austin, for example, you can actually see the layer pop up once you get in, and you can get additional information on that campaign by clicking. So in this case, I'm getting information directly from that layer on what the temperature is where I clicked. You can also click on the dot and get a link to the full report. So if you'd like to read more about that particular campaign. I also want to show you this tab that we're really excited about. The NIHHIS Urban Heat Island mapping campaigns are part of the Biden administration's Justice 40 initiative. And as a result of that, we aim to have the benefits of those mapping campaigns reach at least 40% disadvantaged communities. And we know how well we're doing based on the White House Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, which is newly available. And if we scroll down, you can see this really great interactive feature where you can compare the Urban Heat Island mapping campaign information with the equity analysis from that environmental justice tool that I just mentioned. And so I'm going to pick a different community. Let's go to Houston, Texas. And I'll just scroll down here. Really quickly, just explaining what we're looking at. In the middle is the map of Houston and Harris County, where the mapping campaign was conducted. You can see the relative temperature differences in the red and the blue. If you click on any one of these polygons, you can get more information. So this census tract, you can get the average temperature at this period. This was in the evening from that campaign, as well as some additional information on that census tract. On the left, there's information on all of the statistics for this particular surface. So for the Houston and Harris County campaign, you can see the minimum, maximum range of temperatures, that sort of thing. If I click on a specific polygon, let me zoom in here, such as this one, this box on the lower left pops up and you can see additional information on that polygon from the mapping campaign in the evening as compared to other parts of the map. So you can see what percentile it's in, for example, in the morning, afternoon, and evening. It's a little bit hidden right here because I have my screen pretty compressed just so I can make sure everyone can read all the font. Also on the right, I really want to show something very exciting, which is, let me zoom out here, that equity analysis that I was mentioning. So you can see that this campaign that was conducted reached the proportion of EJ communities, the proportion of disadvantaged census tracts that were mapped is 71%. So we're doing pretty well on that target. You can click on the ring here and you can see which communities were considered disadvantaged based on that CGES tool and which ones were not. And down here, there's a little bar chart or a column graph that shows you the difference in temperature between the EJ and not EJ communities in this map. And I would just note here that this is sensitive to the area that was mapped. And so in the future, we'd like to have it so that you can actually select a portion of the map to get a little bit more control over the sample when you're looking at the difference in temperature between EJ and not EJ communities. At this point, I'll jump to the next tab, the tools and information. There's a lot of information here that is really exciting. These are tools from across the federal government, from HHS, CDC, from OSHA, that we're sharing here that make it easy to find and easy to use. So I won't go into all the tools here, but I would encourage everyone to explore what's available. Down a little bit further, we also have tools from the National Weather Service, some of which are integrated and pulled into this, this site in an interactive way. And just really quickly, I'll show you an example of one of them, the Climate and Health Outlook from the Office of Climate Change and Human Health Equity from HHS. It just takes you right to the page, and then you can immediately open up the PDF, and you can see this is a product that we're excited about because we were part of producing this as well. You can see an analysis of upcoming weather and climate hazards that you should be aware of, such as heat waves or such as hurricanes, and a health interpretation for what to do about that once you have that information. Backing up here, I'll just jump over to the at-risk groups page. Excuse me. We have an initial set of at-risk groups that we have information on that you can jump to, and we anticipate that as we run that webinar series I mentioned, that this set of information will grow. So if I click on older adults, it will jump down to the older adults tab where you can get information on what makes them at risk of complications from extreme heat. And then you can also click this box, which is available in any one of these panes, and get additional resources for this particular group and as it pertains to extreme heat. If I jump over to planning and preparing, I also want to show you the rich content we have there. On the left, we have information rolled up by different groups of people that might be visiting the site. So for example, for decision makers, if I pop this open, you can see essential information from federal agencies. You can see a really great representation from EPA, FEMA, et cetera. Examples of heat emergency response plans and additional information for decision makers. There's also information for other groups, including grants and programs for addressing extreme heat in the home. So we heard about some of these earlier. We have LIHEAP here, the Weatherization Assistance Program, and the BRIC program from FEMA. And then the lower set of boxes is just showing you tips for staying safe in extreme heat. So in this case, if you have to be outside, there's a set of tips for staying safe if you're doing that. Almost done here. On the right side, I'll just show you that we have content on this great infographic that was created by the NIHHIS Interagency Communications Group, and some information on how to stay safe in heat on the right. And the last tab I'll show you is the About tab, which just gives you information on background on the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, as well as a way to contact us. So thank you very much for your attention. And at this point, I'll pass it back to Lori Arguelles to begin our question and answer session.
Thank you so much, Hunter. That was a fantastic run through of the website. Really appreciate it. And I'd like to invite all of our remaining speakers to turn their cameras back on to be ready. Folks, if you have questions, please use the questions tool in your GoToWebinar window. Type a question. If you could please be sure to type your full name, your title, and the name of your media outlet along with your questions. That will be very helpful to us. My colleague Monica Allen is going to help me manage those questions. And again, just as I'm giving folks a second to get their questions into the box, I want to offer thanks again to Dr. Spinrad, to Dr. Bricey, to you, Hunter. This is an extraordinary tool, and I'm sure folks are going to be really excited to use it and to share it. And I also wanted to make sure to introduce Dan Pazut from Esri. Dan was not speaking, but he is available to answer any questions. I know there are some tech-focused folks on the phone as well. We do have about 20 minutes remaining in this hour for questions. So Monica, let me turn to you and see if we have any questions that have come in thus far.
Yes, we just got a question from Ariel Wittenberg from E&E News, and Ariel says, thanks for the webinar. Just wanted to clarify if any of the data or tools on Heat.gov are new, or if it is more a place to collect existing heat-related data from across the federal government.
So Hunter, that seems like maybe a good question for you to start tackling. So why don't you address that and others can add in if there are additional thoughts.
Absolutely. It's a little bit of both. One of the great things about using this platform is that we can pull in the rich data sets that are already available from a number of federal agencies. But we have created some new things as well. So one that I would highlight is just going back to the heat equity mapper. We've been building this over the past several months, and this is a brand new tool that we've just released right now on the call. But it's pulling in data from the urban heat mapping campaigns that we've been conducting over several years through the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, as well as with a number of our partners. So that's a great example, but a little bit of both, some new and some existing.
And Hunter, just to maybe amplify a little bit further, I heard you say earlier that this is intended to be evolving and growing. And so as new needs or issues arise, this is going to be a very dynamic website. So I just wanted to make that point as well. Dr. Spinrad, is there anything else that you would like to add at this point? Yeah, okay. Let's see, Monica, do we have other questions that may have come in?
Not as yet. So folks, please feel free to put your questions in the question area. We're happy to handle them.
And Hunter, that may be a reflection of the beautiful job that you did walking us through this incredible website. Dan, let me just invite you to share for a moment about Esri's role in this, because we really truly appreciate this partnership.
Yeah, you know, we're really excited about this partnership as well. From our perspective, we appreciate that the federal agencies are building this geographic infrastructure that everybody can leverage. You know, and Heat.gov is one example of it, but, you know, we're seeing that across the different agencies and then the interagency groups as well. And one of the great things is that this isn't just a site, it's an open data portal, so that you have access to all of those data layers, all of those web maps through open services, through this hub technology. And so it's really helping to expose, you know, the great content that's coming from all of the federal partners, and then make it easier for people to incorporate that into their geospatial mapping, their analysis, and their communication. So we're excited that our technology, the ArcGIS platform, is enabling this whole government approach to tackling climate change.
And we do have another question now, Lori.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
From Zach Coleman, who's a climate correspondent from Politico. How do you expect lesser resourced health departments and local governments will be able to use these resources? What technical assistance or funding will you provide? And are you able to use these, and are you, my machine's kind of doing one thing.
The joys of technology.
Yeah. And are you committing more people or funding to proactively reach out to governments and health departments? So that's quite a few questions there.
Hunter, you may be closest to this, and I know that you did a great job a moment ago of highlighting some of the grant tools and resources, and I'm sure the context of making this website broadly available is designed to keep folks of all varieties and resource levels included. So perhaps you'd like to start with that response.
Sure, I can start. So I've just opened that box again to show you some of those grant programs that do provide funding to communities to help combat the risks of extreme heat. I would also say that in FY21, the NIHHIS program also offered a grant that was we had a grant program that funded 5 different projects that were looking at local heat risk and using some of the information from these campaigns to help people be a little bit more resilient to heat. So those are some of the places where you can get assistance. I would also note, and I pointed this out earlier, but at the bottom there's a mailing list. And so as federal agencies have more grant opportunities that are available, anyone who signed up for this mailing list, you know, if they're heat related, we do push them out to that mailing list, and we try to make them very accessible to everyone, as well as the news and events part of this page. We'll see those bubbling up here as well.
Thank you, Hunter.
Yeah, Lori, can I add to that, please?
Sure, Dr. Spinrad, please go ahead. And then Dr. Bryson.
Just very briefly. Yeah, so part of the answer is that in the bipartisan infrastructure law, as championed by President Biden, there are resources identified for climate data and services and our ability to get them out there. So NOAA prides ourselves on our ability through our weather forecast offices, our Sea Grant extension agents, our RESAs, the Regional Integrated Science and Assessment capabilities out in the field, if you will, to get this kind of information into the hands of people and to help train them up. So I really call to mind Hunter's identification of the training opportunities embedded on the website. And also you heard extensive reference to the Justice 40 initiative of the administration, where we are specifically focused on trying to get this into the hands of the underserved communities who may not have had this kind of information available in the past. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Spinrad. Dr. Bryson, did you want to add something?
Yeah, with respect to resources and support for local and state health departments, the CDC Climate Ready States and Cities Initiative provides resources to state and local health departments to build these climate adaptation plans going forward. We're looking to grow that program and expand those support. We also have a Climate Ready Tribes initiative with trying to get resources to tribes, which is an important group to focus on as well. And we have lots of outreach efforts with local and state health departments to help build the expertise and provide resources to support them to take these issues on. When there's particularly bad heat events, we send staff to local and state health departments to support them. We recently had some staff in New Mexico, and in the past we've had staff in the Northwest. So we're ready to serve local and state health departments directly and through our cooperative agreement program.
Thank you all. Monica, do we have other questions?
Yes, we have a few more coming in. Thank you for this great presentation, says Karen Reeves of the S&P Global Newsroom, and asks, can you speak a little bit more about how the business community may be able to use this site? I'm especially curious about the electricity sector. Is this a site you think power utilities will find useful too?
Dr. Spinrad, would you like to maybe start with that? And then Hunter, you may have some additional information that you can provide.
Yeah, it's a good question, because clearly the environmental information that's embedded in here about projections of heat are relevant to decisions associated with the grid, the power community, also transportation community, the commerce community. Many communities depend on having those kinds of products. The emphasis here, of course, is the integration of climate, or I should say of the heat information with the health impacts. So the data we collect, the products we develop in the climate arena, in many cases have multiple applications. And what this question about business applications alludes to, of course, begs the question of how much versatility there is in the data that we collect. I would add that some of those industries that I just mentioned do have heat health concerns. Obviously, the construction industry is one that wants to make sure it's got the best information possible to keep its workers safe. So there are some intersections, obviously, with a number of industries, but these data are also being used independently of the heat impacts, of the health impacts for a number of business decisions. Thanks.
Hunter, is there anything that you would want to add to that?
All I would add at this point is that it sounds like you may have identified another little box that we should add here over time. So a great opportunity to point out that we are looking to grow this, and so that's excellent feedback for us. I know we'd be interested in doing that, and as Dr. Spinrad said, there's a lot of information available right now, and I would just point to the Tools and Information tab where some of that can be found, and we are always interested in finding additional ways to help out various business groups to better serve their constituencies, better serve their customers with climate information.
And Lori, I can't resist the opportunity that Hunter sort of indicated there, and that is there is a parallel platform called Climate.gov where a lot of these user communities can go to get the very specific information about what are we going to see, what's the seasonal outlook for temperature for my area of interest. So this is part of a family of platforms associated with our climate products and services.
And I'd point out that climate.gov is integrated into this one as well. And for whoever asked that question, thank you for a great question, an example of your dynamic government in service to you, working in the moment. So let's move on to the next question, Monica.
Okay, this question is from Andy Revkin, who has his own publication, the Revkin Bulletin. For heat, flood, and so much more, a vital issue is capacity at the user end and lack thereof. What funds or projects are planned to boost heat smart responsiveness of people in key regions?
So Dr. Spinrad, I'm not sure if you want to, or Dr. Bricey, if you'd like to share, kind of from particular perspectives, maybe Dr. Bricey from the CDC's perspective.
Sure. This is a big challenge. We know across the board, public health support at local state levels is not what we need it to be. And that applies to climate-related, heat-related issues equally as well. When we interview local health departments, 87% of them tell us, almost 90% of them tell us they don't have the staff to deal with these issues going forward, which is why support programs and grant opportunities like we talked about here are really crucial, and why building the public health workforce at CDC, the resources for that are also being used to help build some of the climate-ready workforce that needed to address these things also. So it's something we're aware of, it's something we're trying to address, and it's something we're applying resources to deal with.
And I would add from the NOAA perspective, Andy, that if you look at our FY23 budget submission, you saw over $200 million more associated with climate investments of a variety of types, a lot of which will go towards the risks, if you will, the perils that you identified: heat, fire, flood. I'd add coastal resilience in there as well, and drought, obviously. So that is a major area of investment for us above and beyond what we currently have.
Thank you. Monica, I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions.
Okay, I've got a good question here from Sean Sublette of the Times-Dispatch in Richmond, Virginia. Can you give a top-level example of how this tool might be used a couple of days ahead of a forecasted heat wave across 2 to 3 states for health professionals, local state governments? Of course, every location is different, but could you make a comment on how this might be optimally used? Thank you.
So maybe Dr. Brycey, would you like to start with that one? And then Dr. Spenrad, perhaps you can follow up. And Hunter, if you had anything specific to add to that.
Sure. So there's lots of examples I think we can point to. So the simplest thing, in advance of knowing that an extreme heat event is on the way, there's a wide range of public communication activities can be taken to identify, to help to target to people who are at risk, to make sure that people know what their risks, know the steps they can take to minimize that risk going forward. There are resources we can pre-place in terms of making sure there's access to water, making sure the cooling centers are up, making sure people know where the cooling centers are all things we can do in advance of a heat event. Clinicians can alert their patients if they know that are at risk, to also the steps they can take to avoid the medical consequences and be alert to the symptoms they need to be aware of. And so there's a host of things that we can do with this advanced warning from the data that NOAA provides us, particularly from a health standpoint.
Dr. Spenrad?
Yeah, I agree with everything Pat raised, and I would add that one of the things we're trying to do at NOAA is expand our horizons a bit in terms of who the potential user communities are. And as one example, I would say we've begun an active dialogue with the faith-based community. It turns out houses of worship can be excellent cooling centers, and the faith-based community is very interested in having the best information that they can use to make the similar kinds of decisions that you heard Pat allude to with respect to clinicians. So we're learning how big the audience is, and at NOAA we're trying to reach out to a much broader set of potential users.
If I could elaborate a little, through the heat health tracker, for example, you can identify where there's concentrations of elderly people who live alone. And these are places that you're going to need to target your resources going forward. They're the people who don't have the social support necessarily there. And so there's lots of resources that we can bring to bear when we are forecast that these things are about to happen.
And Hunter is the man on the ground who's been putting all these data sets together. Is there anything else that that you'd like to point out as probably the most well-informed user of all of Heat.gov?
Well, I think we've just heard a really great case study. So to bring it all together, of course, you can see the heat wave coming from this main page, from this site, this interactive map. And then as you do see it coming, there's a lot of information, both the tools and information tab as well as the planning and preparing tab, to help people think through what they could be doing at any stage, whether it's planning or preparedness or response. So that was a really nice example that was just given.
Fantastic. And Monica, I think let's see how quickly we get the next question answered, and maybe we'll have time for one more after that.
I think this is a pretty easy question, and it comes from Angli Mercado. I'm not sure the outlet. The person did not provide the outlet, but they're wondering if the website has information in other languages.
Hunter, do you want to tackle that? I think you mentioned that in the briefing, but it's worth saying again. And then maybe Dan, given that the website architecture is really Esri's, perhaps you could elaborate a bit on that.
Sure, I could make two comments. The first is I did show this earlier. The site itself is translatable into a variety of other languages. If you click this little pop-up, it'll bring up the a list of a variety of languages, and it does a really good job translating. I played with it a little bit, and then I don't know specifically which resources in here. Maybe this is another good opportunity for us to kind of pull those out. But I know that as I've explored some of the resources in these tabs, some of them, I think, for example, the resources from OSHA on water rest shade are available in multiple languages. So here we go. See, I knew if I jumped in here, I'd be able to find an example. So it's also available in Spanish. So we can make that a little bit clearer, which resources are available in a variety of different languages.
Dan, would you like to just expand on that a little bit, given that, talk a little bit more about that translation tool and how does it apply to the whole site?
Right, so it would apply to the site, that the content that is written into the site, like the stuff that we're seeing around what are the signs of heat-related illness. And this is using just industry standard auto translators. So it's not like this is a Canadian government tool in which they're manually going through and saying, here's English and French. This is an automated translation. So it may not be perfect, but there's dozens of languages that it does translate into.
Great, thank you. And Monica, if we have one more, I think we can probably squeeze it in.
Sure, this is, I think, a technical question. I'm not sure, but I think our technical experts might know about this. Is API available for this? And this is from U.S. Harbor's editor and owner, Anastasia Fisher. Is that something that rings a bell, Dan?
Yeah, I can take that one. So there is an API for all of the data, maps, and services that are part of the Open Data Hub. And so I think Hunter clicked on the hamburger button at the top. And from there is, if you click into any of those resources, there is the REST API, which is an open protocol to access any of the underlying data.
And for those who may not be in the know, what does API stand for?
That's a automated programming interface. So it's a way in which you can access the data through a programming interface.
All right, very good. Well, thank you all so much for your participation on the reporter side. If you have additional questions, please contact Monica Allen. Monica, thank you for doing such a great job of curating the questions and sharing those. And I think with that, we are concluded. Thank you all for joining us today.